Welcome to Futures Hub, the podcast that ignites curiosity and navigates the pathways to tomorrow. I'm Mia, your guide on this journey into the future, where we explore the art of foresight, community co-creation, and personal growth. In each episode, we dive deep into innovative techniques to unlock the potential to shape our individual capacities and contribute to vibrant, flourishing communities. Join us as we mine the rich landscape of foresight, community empowerment, and building bridges between diverse voices. Whether you're a seasoned futurist or just dipping your toes into the world of foresight, this is the space where we craft futures for all. Let's embark on this journey together. Welcome to Futures Hub. Today we have another great conversation lined up for you. Joining us is Everton Lewis, Managing Director and Head of Consulting at OCAD UK, where he leads teams in using systems thinking and design to create impactful strategies. Everton helps companies create products and experiences that truly matter for their businesses, employees, and customers. He delivers solutions by bringing together cross-functional teams, including designers, researchers, data analysts, and business strategists. He has worked for several consulting companies, including IBM Interactive, successfully leading teams of up to 100 consultants and growing design-related revenue streams. He has successfully collaborated with companies such as Moderna, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Early Warning Services, Zella Network, CIBC, RBC, and both federal and provincial governments of Canada. Everton is a guest lecturer and invited speaker at conferences. In the past, Everton's project teams won the Service Design Network's Global Award and Fast Company's Innovation by Design Awards. Everton developed the curriculum and is an instructor for the Service Design Certificate offered by the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies. He currently runs the Futures Design Studio at OCAD University. In this role, he collaborates with leaders to create resilient products, services, and strategies by integrating futures thinking, systems thinking, and design thinking. Everton is also a partner of Impact Signal, a service design and analytics consultancy. In this episode, we'll dive into Everton's journey from consulting to leading a futures design studio. We'll explore how he blends analysis, creativity, and collaboration to move beyond innovation theater and into real, transformative change. This episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So let's dive in. Thank you so much, Everton, for joining us today on the Futures Hub podcast. I'm so excited to have you here as a guest to hear your insights about your journey and about your work in this space. Can you share a bit more about your journey and how you went from consulting with companies to leading OCAD UK?
For me, it was very much a gradual change and shift. I went and completed my MBA, and I was very much focused on business at that time and thinking about management consulting from the business lens. But then in my first company that I joined IBM, and I was involved quite a bit with designing enterprise software, agile methods, and I saw the difference that it makes when you actually engage users in the design process. So I actually had the unfortunate experience of building the same system twice. The first time we built it didn't go very well. Typical waterfall approach where all the requirements were gathered up front, and then the development team built it, and then it went into testing. And when it went into testing, the users said that they couldn't use this the way that it was designed. And it had a really great purpose. It was meant to protect children that were in care. So it was meant to pull together all of the information from all different jurisdictions to make sure that offenders weren't jumping jurisdictions and avoiding being flagged by the system. So all that to say that it was a really important purpose, and we spent time, a lot of energy, a lot of money building it, but it wasn't conducive to the way that the social workers wanted to work. That was not a good feeling, not a good feeling being part of a project that ultimately was a failure. And so what we did is we were able to actually get and secure money to come and do it again. So what we ended up doing is taking a more of an agile approach and actually engaging the users throughout and really building with the users in mind from the beginning. So for me, that was really the light bulb moment that changed my approach to things and said, okay, there's really something here. If we can be more human-centered, if we can really focus on design from that human perspective, we can build things. So that's where business, Now I put the design lens on it, and then I was really very much focusing on that. I spent a lot of time doing that, and I wanted to get even deeper. So I actually left IBM and I went to a boutique consulting company. And I did that where I was really focused on learning and perfecting my craft of service design. So that's where I got into the design piece, really changing from business into design. And then as part of that work, I started to hire OCAD grads. And they were bringing interesting ideas and insights to the work that I was doing. So there was the Strategic Foresight and Innovation Program, and I hired three of their grads, and everything we did with clients that they were involved with was really resonating and really moving the bar for those clients. So from that, I started to really get exposure to OCAD and the professors at OCAD and the thinking at OCAD. And then I've done other things. I've run my own business. I've done a bunch of different things, but I've always been around this circle because I really think the value of the tools and methods that are coming out of the SFI program, the Digital Futures program, are impressive. So ultimately, what happened is that I was asked if I would be interested in joining and helping during a transition period at OCAD UCO. And I said, yeah, count me in, because I see this as something that not a lot of people know about, not a lot of people understand how these tools and methods can get applied. So having access to the faculty to me was an interesting thing. And then being able to try to think a little bit more about how can we position OCAD UCO and OCAD University and design methods and tools in a way that would really resonate with business. That's the challenge that I'm at right now. So it was really more of a gradual process, going from the traditional business experience to a very much a design focused, and I would say now even innovation focused and foresight focused.
If someone were to ask you in a nutshell, what does OCAD Code do then? What would you say OCAD Code does for those who are completely new to the space?
I would say that OCAD UCO really is a bridge between the knowledge, the people, the skills that are at OCAD University and the business problems and challenges that are being tackled in the corporate world. And I think there's a nice back and forth there. So for the school, they get the opportunity to learn a little bit more in terms of what our business is thinking about. How can we now maybe tweak what we're talking about, the case studies, the examples that we're working through with students to help them to understand and be ready for the work world. And then there's the other piece for the businesses, seeing how they can use some of these tools, skills, methods to tackle problems that maybe they wouldn't have thought of tackling in this way. So to me, OCAD UCO is the bridge. And I see my role as really the chief problem finder. So I'm out there trying to find those problems and trying to find those opportunities to demonstrate the value.
Wonderful. So the chief problem finder, not the chief problem solver.
Yeah, well, so the thing is that I have my teams, right? So I have really experienced individuals who are part of the teams. So it actually tends to be my role to make sure that I match the companies and our consultants to make sure that those problems get solved. So I do feel like I'm less involved in the day-to-day, like actually cracking the nut of the problem. That's just how it is.
For sure. And those teams, do they consist of students, current students, or do they consist of alumni students? Are they a mix of both? How does that look? And how do you become that bridge? How do you find the problem, find the team, put them together? How does that secret sauce come together?
A good point of clarification is that for OCAD UCO, we don't use current students. So we use alumni, freelancers, faculty. So that's our focus. We're not giving students their first opportunity at business consulting. That's not our model. Our model is really taking people who are experienced practitioners and or faculty and then giving them an opportunity to apply their knowledge to problems. So that's a good clarification. And then the other question you asked about is the secret sauce. What's the secret sauce? I feel like that's a skill set that I've developed over the last 15 years. So having managed a lot of different teams, having teams of over 100. I was counting the other day because I put together a full CV, and I've done over 100 projects. I've done over 100 projects in the last 20 years. So I've either directly been involved or managed those projects. I think that it's actually just a bit of experience in terms of understanding things that might work. The other thing I would say is that I've also learned how to put teams together in a way that lets them thrive a bit faster. Because sometimes you have conflicts within teams. But what I've found in my experiences, it's about actually having those conversations, establishing those norms early. And then once you've done that, then having people in a situation where they can now go from there's that model forming, storming, norming, and then performing, using some tools and using some approaches to really level that off so that we can put teams together and then get them to the point where they can start performing at a high level soon. As I just walk it through with you there, I think it's one experience, knowing what might work. But then I think the other piece is actually having some processes in place when we put teams together to make sure that they norm quickly and then they are in a position where they can start to perform.
You have a significant CV for sure, and the teams that you've led have won several prestigious awards. You've won the Service Design Network's Global Award, Fast Company's Innovation by Design Awards. You've alluded to how part of that secret sauce is the strong leadership. You didn't say that, but I unpacked that in so many words I could read between the lines. And good teams, strong teams that are able to perform together. But when you think of the over 100 plus projects that you've completed over your career, are there any lessons or principles that particularly stand out for you as universally applicable across those successes? Is there something around the service design or the foresight design? Is there anything in particular that you find continues to pop up as you tackle these different projects?
Yeah. So if I think of those projects, the ones that we won awards for, those were the most ambiguous and the most complicated and had probably the most constraints. And they forced the thinking in new ways. I think that that is something that I've now a lot more comfortable with and understanding that that can lead to really good things. So constraints can lead to good things if you're willing to open your mind and be flexible around where you're going to go. That's what I would say I've learned is that ambiguous situations are okay if you're willing to get into them and if you can get and establish a trust with your partner. And I could say with a lot of those projects, there were rocky roads because again, it was very complicated, ambiguous, lots of things happening, people under a lot of pressure. It wasn't smooth sailing. Any of those projects, they weren't smooth sailing, but you have the opportunity in those moments to demonstrate what you're about. And if you can demonstrate in those moments that you care about the client, you care about the problem, you care about their situation, then you can really get to a whole nother level with them. And then you can go to places that you potentially couldn't go if you hadn't gone through those rocky roads or those difficult conversations.
That's wonderful perspective. And I think that's really good insight because I think it's human nature to be inherently uncomfortable with challenging conversations or relationships or friction or complications. And it's just such a pearl of wisdom that you've shared that constraint can be a good thing. Constraint can make you think outside of the box and force you to think outside of the box when most of the time it's more comfortable to play it safe. And I wonder, in terms of myths around design or thinking that might go against the grain, are there any other myths that you find floating out there in the design space or in your workspace that you wish you could debunk?
Yeah. One of the things that I've been involved with more now is futures design. And what is futures design? A lot of people think it's about predicting the future, and that's not the case. It really is not the case. So when I think of futures design and where we want to go with that, it's more about understanding the signals, the trends, and then helping organizations start to make decisions now towards a preferred future. And as you start to think about that, you also start to think about what are those important elements that you want to consider for a preferred future. And part of that is sustainability, responsible, inclusive design, and things like that. That's one thing that I've been bumping up to a little bit more in terms of people like, futurists. And I'm like, futurists are not crystal ball holders. That's not what it's about. It isn't. So that's one thing I would say as a myth of design. And then I don't know if this is a myth, but I think the idea that it's just something that a really amazing designer just pulls out. There's actually a creative process many times. And one of the things that I think is really cool about design leaders and people who do interesting things in the design world is that they have that creative confidence. I don't really know what the answer is, but I know if I go through the process and I get the right inputs, it's going to lead me into a good direction. I don't know if it's a myth, but just the idea that it just happens. What I would say is most creatives have a process that they go through. It might be hard for you to understand looking at it from the outside what the process is, but I think that there's something there. And usually there's a process. And if you've got the creative confidence, that's the way that I frame it, then you can go through and make something over time.
I love that. And as a creative at heart, I feel like I'm just so happy hearing you speak about futures in that way because I do feel that it tends to either be, oh, futurists, they're going to bust out their crystal balls or whatever and tell the future, or futurists are designers and there's this XYZ sort of pattern that you follow. But I think that creativity piece, we talk about the importance of creativity in foresight and futures work, but the inherent creativity of a futures practitioner, I really appreciate. And it gives that different lens that is really neat to see. I think one of the things you mentioned is designing for a preferred future and what that means. How do you ensure that the features and products that you design are inclusive and sustainable and are designed for all communities, so not just a privileged few? In your bio, it was stated that you like to create products and experiences that matter, and that's at the core of your work. So, how do you continue to center that in your work when there's so many other demands?
To me, good design engages a variety of users because I think that that's where you can find the opportunities for innovation and novel ideas. Because if you're always talking to the same group or the core group, you're not necessarily going to get those new, interesting ideas that can expand your market. So for me, a big part of it is really communicating to the businesses that I work with that there's opportunities by engaging broadly. Sometimes you'll have groups that are like, let's just design for that one persona or that single group where we can maximize the profitability. You can take that approach, but if you're only doing that, you're not going to have that opportunity to find those new ideas and new insights that are going to lead you into new markets, new features, new things that are going to really make your company scale. For me, a big part of it is communicating the value of being inclusive, of being broader in terms of the groups you're looking at, the value of designing at the fringe. So if we're looking for some of those small samples that are really interesting and seeing what you can learn from that. There's examples of looking and trying to create something for a small group that ended up being something valuable for the larger group. That's something that I just try to keep to the top of mind with companies that I'm working with in terms of like there's value there. And if you're not doing it, then you're potentially losing out.
One of the pieces on OCAD UCO's site alludes to innovation theater. So the
Yeah.
idea that you want to move beyond innovation theater. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about what this term means and how you know when you're on the right track towards moving beyond that, beyond the theater of innovation to true transformation.
Innovation theater, people are happy, but it's unclear what the impact was. What changed meaningfully from the work that was done. One of the things we try to do is really make sure that we're collecting impact statements from the work. What impact did it have? And we try to think broadly because, again, it's not always about revenue. It can be about other types of things, but we do need to think about what is the impact of the work. So that's a really important piece of moving away from innovation theater, being able to collect those impact statements and user testimonials, not project member testimonials, not people who work for the company and think that stuff is cool, really the users and what are their thoughts as you go forward.
I wonder if we can unpack this a little bit more. There have been several projects that you've worked on that deal with quite complex situations where it could be challenging to track that impact. And
Mhm.
there's also that ongoing discussion about how do you quantitatively measure impact for things that are perhaps a little bit more nebulous or perhaps not measurable in a particular way. Considering the way that you straddle this transformative space, this innovative space, but you also very much have that business background and that business insight, how do you reconcile these two things in order to demonstrate impact to different audiences?
I have used a couple different models in the past that I think are helpful. So one of the things that resonated with me, Frog at one time put out a document called the business value of design. And in the business value design, they had five general categories for value that potentially can be derived. From there, you could potentially, in one or two steps, if you articulate the work that you're doing in design, match it towards one of those business values of design. I'll give you a couple examples. So one is speed. If by doing mock-ups and doing collaborative sessions, you can increase the speed of decision making, that's one of the values potentially of design. Another example of a value of design is a new market, so expanding your market. So if you actually do customer research and you have a new insight and you find a new opportunity, then now you have a new market, so you're expanding the market reach. If you can trace from the research works that's being done to that, that's a way that you can start to communicate value. And then again, if we come back to the example in terms of why should you be designing and engaging with some of those other groups that are not the main persona, because there's that opportunity to create that expansion in your market reach by getting those types of insights. So those are ways that you can start to articulate the reason why you're doing the work. I found that model and other similar models to be helpful because I should, within two logical steps, trace my belief in terms of the things that are happening. The way I think of it is like a design intervention. If I'm doing some sort of design intervention, I should be able to articulate it back to one of these business values of design. And if I do that, you start to get the buy-in from the business around supporting the work that's taking place. So those are just some simple examples there, but I do think that that is something that designers need to do a better job of in general, and something that I think is important for success. And what I've seen is that design leaders, they're able to do more of that articulation of the business value. And just to be clear, it's not always about revenue, it's not always about cost, but you do need to start to think about what are we talking about and where do we see the value. Something that's not about revenue is just transformative abilities. Sometimes you want to be able to move your organization. And by being able to bring people together to make decisions, you're actually helping your company to flex that muscle of transformative ability. That's the type of thing that it's not a revenue direct, but in this world where things are complicated and things are changing all the time, being able to make decisions as a group is valuable. And that's another thing that design can do. Design, or at least the way that I practice design, is it being able to be collaborative and being able to find ways to make decisions as a group. And whether it's making it more tangible so people understand it, making clear in terms of what this might be or what that might be. These are all things that are helpful when you're starting to think about how do you transform your business.
I find it interesting as we talk because there's several different versions of design that we have discussed. We've
Mm.
talked about the service design, we've talked about user design, we've talked about features design, and very broadly speaking as well, just the design space in general. Is there one type of design that personally draws you, that appeals to you? Or have you found that you've just been picking up various design trades as you go and it's just created this wonderful combination?
Exactly like you said. I'm not in a school of one design by no means. I'm very much about solving the problem. And actually, I believe in breaking models and just doing whatever is helpful and joining, merging, whatever is helpful, talking about things in ways that are helpful. Like the words that I use in company A and the words that I use in company B are different, because it's important for people to just hear things in a way that aligns with what they understand and where they want to go. To reaffirm, I'm not wedded to any type of design. I think of design as just a way of engaging and thinking, and I just pull things together that are helpful for the problem solving. So for me, I started IBM Interactive very much thinking about user research, very much thinking about journey maps and the value of those things. Now I spend more time thinking about systems and levers, because now it's more about, from an organizational perspective, what are the levers that we need to push and pull, and how do we think about this organization within an ecosystem that's always changing, and how do we make sure we understand that, and how do you make decisions as an organization that's going to help you move forward. But it's not that I've forgotten any of those earlier tools. I'm just adding more tools to help depending on the situation. So now I can go in and still work with a team that's building software. And I can also work with an organization that's trying to transform who they are. Each of those things are, in my mind, design related. It's just the types of conversations, the people that I would engage, some of the tools I would use are slightly different, but I just think of it all as design. And I enjoy having that opportunity to figure out what's the problem, how are we going to actually tackle this problem, how could we potentially create a path forward with this group so that we can get to a successful place. And coming back to something else that we talked about earlier is, and then how do we measure that impact? Because it's not enough to just go in and say we gave them some nice ideas, we gave them some slides, we felt good about each other because we created this mock-up of a product that looks cool and everybody was excited about, but nobody built. Those are the things that I'm really trying to push more on in terms of the impact statements. But overall, I'm agnostic, very, very much agnostic to the design process and the design name. I don't care.
I think that's important in this world filled with constraints and systems issues and lots of changes to have that agnostic approach so that you can put on whichever hat is needed depending on the problem. I think your depth and breadth of knowledge and experience really explains that value add that you provide to the projects and the teams that you work with and OCAD UCO as well. And you talked about complex systems and bridging and being that bridge. In your current role, you are a bridge between two different systems to a certain extent, that bridge between business and post-secondary. You have a very unique position in that, of course, you've developed the service design certificate at U of T, and you're an instructor there as well. And you're also working within OCAD UCO. So from your unique vantage point and with your experience, what are your thoughts on those two systems, on the evolution of post-secondary education currently and business needs and design? How do you think that these systems will evolve in order to equip the next generation of leaders?
Education system needs to change. We're seeing a lot of pressures in a variety of different places. In Canada specifically, we're seeing pressures on funding, pressures on what happens with the graduates after they come out, and in terms of their success rates. So we're seeing a lot of pressures on that. Well, I'm thinking a little bit more on OCAD University because that's where I'm close to. OCAD has a unique position in terms of Ontario College of Art and Design, almost 150-year-old institution, but an institution that very much has been focused on practice-based education. So if you take that as one of the things that's fundamental, what could that look like in the future? I'm not sure what it is going to be, but I would say that there needs to be elements that are core that we want to keep, but there's other things that we do need to get rid of and change. And I'm not the ultimate decider for OCAD University. They're going to make decisions, but I do think that for every school, I think there's that exercise of what's the core piece of what you're going to be doing. And for universities at one time, people basically invested so that when they came out, they could have a different type of job that started at a different range of salary. I don't think that value proposition is there anymore for a university. So if that's not the value proposition, what are you offering for your students? And based on that, how do you actually teach them in a way that gives them that? Because I think there's two pieces, that A, the value proposition, and then the style. There's lots of different teaching methods, and some universities are experimenting with it. Some are further ahead, some are less. So I think there's that other piece too, in terms of, does everything need to be the way it was before? Not necessarily. Do you need to sit down, bum and seat for a certain amount of time? Not necessarily. But I know some universities are charging their students $4,000 for a class, but it's all online. And then the question is, so what is the value? Is the textbook the value? Because if the textbook's the value, then I don't know if I need to spend that much money to go to an online class, for example. Or is the value in the interactions with their classmates? And if it is, then how do you create that? Is the value with the student life? And then how do you make sure that that's something that is there for students and that they get that? So I know I haven't given you a specific answer, but in my mind, I do think that there's an opportunity for schools to just think about what is their core value, and for institutions like OCAD to be like, okay, what's going to be the essence of us? For U of T, what is going to be the essence of us? Those are the two schools I'm at. I personally can see both of them carving out a place in the Canadian landscape, but I do think that that's something that they need to define and then start to work through.
It's perhaps a question without an answer, to be honest. It's the messy middle that we're navigating right now. Recognizing the transitional space that post-secondary education, for example, is in right now, and yet leading an arm of a post-secondary educational institution, what would your vision be for OCAD UCO in 5 years' time? Where do you want to see that going? What would that impact and success look like for you when you think about your tenure at OCAD UCO?
So there's OCAD UCO and there's OCAD University. So let me give you a little bit of both. So for OCAD UCO, which is the consulting arm design studio of OCAD University, for me, success looks like people are very aware of OCAD UCO. They're very aware of the type of knowledge and skills that are at OCAD University, and they want it. They want either someone, maybe Cole, maybe another company, to come in and consult to give them that type of knowledge, or alternatively, they want to hire graduates who have that type of background. So that to me is success in terms of, we've now created demand in the corporate world for more and more of foresight, systems thinking, all of these things that we're talking about at OCAD University. And the reason the demand's there is because it's valuable. It's making an impact. People are loving it because it's making a difference. So that's the code. That would be success there. And then I think for OCAD University, if I think bigger and broader, is that OCAD University has carved out a place. They are the undisputed champions. And people are like, that's what we go to OCAD University for, because this is what they're about. And it's clear to people who are coming in as students, it's clear to funders, people who want to donate money. They just know what it's all about. And they're like, yes, and it's valuable. So I think that that is the opportunity for OCAD University, which is maybe a little bit slightly different than Co.
Well, those are two wonderful visions. And from there, I'm curious, knowing your career and all of the experiences you've gathered and all the successes that you found, what is your vision for yourself in the next 10 years? What does the future of Everton Lewis look like?
That's an interesting question. So for me, the future of Everton Lewis is that I get to continue to find interesting problems and tackle them either myself or with my team. And I think the change is just the scale of what I'm dealing with. I do see a future where I spend more time on more international things, and I spend time on things that are more systemic. So really trying to help to make some systems changes that would be important for Canada, North America, and further afield if possible.
I love that. So in 10 years, I get to be like, I talked to Everton. That guy that you see on the world stage, that's the person I talked to. So I'm so excited for that to happen.
It might be me to be like, hey, People come around, Mia, look, I knew her.
You know what? Maybe we'll just be having this conversation on the world stage at some point. So, right now, we're having it on this podcast, but maybe in 10 years, we will be on a global level having this conversation, and it would be a wonderful thing.
It would be a wonderful thing.
So, as we approach the end of our time together, just wondering if there's any events or engagements or calls to actions that you'd like to share with the audience, any final insights or words of wisdom.
If you're interested in design, just keep finding new things that you can do and really try to articulate the value and be clear if you're in a business context, how you're mapping the work that you're doing to where the organization is going. Design is powerful and something that I've fallen into, but I'm happy I fell into it. I just didn't know about it. So I think it's good if we can do more in terms of articulating the value and the reasons why.
Thank you so much, Everton. Honestly, it's such a pleasure and you're such a wealth of knowledge. And I'm so appreciative that you shared it with us today. I'm going to put the date in my calendar for 10 years from now for us to reconnect.
Absolutely. I agree. Let's see where we're at. Thank you, Mia. I really appreciated it. Thank you for taking the time to chat because it's always nice to step back a bit and actually think about these things. So thank you.